My name is Donna Adair, and I'm a docent here at the DuBois House. I want to point out these authentic Seminole dolls on top of the pie safe here. Most of us think of the Seminoles as being original native Florida tribe, but in actuality they were not native to Florida. They were members of the Creek, the Choctaw, and the Cherokee tribes who were living in Georgia, Alabama, and the Carolinas, but they were being pushed off their native lands during the 1700s and 1800s by increased white settlement. So certain members of those tribes gathered together and created a tribe to be called the Seminoles. And that new tribe moved down into Florida, where very few whites had settled yet due to the heat, the humidity, and the bugs, let's face it. When the Seminoles moved down into Florida, they managed to pick up escaped African American slaves from the plantations in those southern areas and adopted them into the tribe. That unfortunately brought about the three Seminole Wars between 1817 and 1858. Many of the Seminoles were killed, many more were captured and forced to march from here all the way out to Oklahoma, which was Indian Territory at that time. By the turn of the 20th century, however, the wars were over and many of the Seminoles settled west of Jupiter, and they would come into Jupiter to trade with the DuBois family, other settlers, and the supply ship. And they would bring along these dolls that they made in their settlement west of Jupiter, authentic Seminole dress. And they would also bring otter pelts, raccoon skins, gator hides, and sometimes herds of livestock to trade. The DuBois family was an extremely self-sufficient family, like most of the pioneers in the state of Florida. I'll move now into the kitchen. They were raising their own vegetables, they were raising their own chickens, mostly for the eggs and not so much for the meat. They rarely got a tender, juicy young frying chicken. It was an old, worn-out stewing hen who had laid her last egg, and into the pot she went. It was the eggs that they were after. And of course, given the location that they were living, they relied quite a bit on fish and shellfish. They spent much time hunting and fishing. They also raised a milk cow, which Susan would milk, and she would make that milk or cream into butter. It was a very difficult lifestyle, but it must have been very satisfying because everything that they possessed, they created by their own hands. Now, the things that they could not produce on site here, they would get from a supply ship that came down what's now the Intercoastal Waterway from the northeast coast of Florida. And they would go on board there to purchase flour, cornmeal, baking soda, coffee, household items that could not be produced here at the time. Now, Susan was reputed to be an excellent cook, and one of the things she was most famous for was her oyster stew. And that, of course, was created using milk from the family cow and oysters that were plentiful, as you can tell by the shell mound that we're standing on, which is made of oyster shells, millions of oyster shells. So she was an excellent cook, despite having to use a kitchen that was the size of a large closet. It was separated from the main part of the house. Unlike the rest of the house, the kitchen is a reconstruction. Kitchens don't last too well in the heat and humidity of Florida, and it had to be rebuilt when the house was restored during the 2005 to 2015 era. Water was supplied through the use of cisterns, and cisterns hold rainwater, not wells, and the rainwater was stored in two huge cisterns, one that held 12,000 gallons. The water was piped into the only room in the house that had running water, which was the kitchen, and the kitchen sink had a hand pump like that one over there under the window, and that's how they acquired their water. So we have a more modern butter churn over here. We have a bottled gas stove that would have been in use at that time. And we have a marvelous 1927 General Electric monitor top refrigerator, not an ice box, a true refrigerator. The interesting story behind this also is when the Loxahatchee Guild went to pick it up from the person they bought it from in about 2010, she had to unplug it from the wall, open it, and empty out her groceries. She was still using it. They don't make them like they used to, as we say. We also have a 1930s era phone on the wall, which is always fun for the kids to try and figure out what the heck it is, why it has a horn hanging there, and why there's no place to tap in your number. Things have changed tremendously over the years, and it's marvelous that we have this house where we can learn from our ancestors and appreciate the very difficult life that they did, and we enjoy this DuBois house so very much.